Unstructured data represents about 80% of the data in a typical organization like ours. That's a lot of data out there. And so, yes, we should be looking to go after that data, get good controls around who owns it, who maintains it, and then put it into a structured format in a data warehouse or the like. We shouldn't stop that, but we should also recognize that as we're doing that, we have more and more technology that's capable of looking at unstructured data and going across the two. So the combination of the two is where AI plays its role. The governance of how we use that data, how we ensure the integrity and the quality of that data.
I'm Steve Swan. Join me for the next episode of Biotech Bites with Steve Eichorn, VP of IT and CIO of Cytiva. We discuss AI, security, and a low-code environment. And Steve shares with us some of his favorite bands from the 90s. Join me. Thanks. Steve, real quick, at the beginning, at the top, I love to just ask folks, tell me a little bit about you, meaning how did you get to where you are?
Again, thank you for having me, Steve. Pleasure to be here. I began my career in finance, actually. My dream was to work on Wall Street. I went to college for accounting, got a degree in accounting, moved to New York City, and I went to work right away in the investment banking industry, working as an analyst. And I was fascinated with the industry, as I always was, and it was very interesting, it was very challenging, but I knew it wasn't where I wanted to stay long-term very, very quickly. And I think in hindsight, I would say the individual nature of the work there versus a more team-oriented collaboration environment was probably a driving force for moving me away from my original Wall Street ambitions. After that, I spent a few years working as a controller at an international furniture and textile company based in Soho. And they had an international footprint in terms of manufacturing and commercial operations. In that role, I started to gain an appreciation for complex supply chains, sales forecasting, pricing models. And I got into developing mathematical models that helped me to improve business outcomes. And that got me into developing some rudimentary automation applications, and I got a taste for programming. That really got me into a little bit of appreciation for technology in general and realizing how the right IT infrastructure is critical to those business success, those business outcomes. After that, I spent a few years in management consulting. And I did about 7 years I spent at two companies there. I cut my teeth on large-scale ERP implementations. I worked across all the platforms, SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft. Was able to work on some engagements actually in the financial services industry. So that was actually very, very appealing to me. And after, as I said, about 7 years, a lot of travel, a lot of moving around, I ended up accepting a role with GE. And that role was really, they were in the beginning stages of a major ERP project at that point in time. I did go to GE, assuming that, I'd be able to stop traveling a little bit. My wife and I had met and got married. We were trying to have a kid. And so I really wasn't looking to stay there too long, but I wanted to at least settle down a little bit to at least be able to have a kid and be able to start a little bit of a life there. Go back to consulting was where I was probably going to head. And to be honest, I just kind of fell in love with where I was working in GE. So I spent 18 years with GE. Working in various roles, moved into different opportunities, growing and developing in various roles of increasing responsibility and leadership. And so it was a really pivotal move in my career. And then in 2020, when GE sold the biopharma business, I went with the new company. Our new company is Cytiva. And I've been the vice president of information technology and CIO since October of 2023. And this has been an amazing journey. So I'm really, really thrilled to be working at a company like Cytiva. This is a company that really, really leads in the therapeutic space in the life sciences industry. And that's pretty much my story, how I got here today.
So tell me real quick, or for the folks that don't know, Cytiva, total employee size, and then your group within Cytiva.
Yeah, so Cytiva, we have about 14,000 associates operating across, I would say, I think it's about 41 countries. We have about 78 sites across those 41 countries.
Very cool. Yeah, and what I've seen just as a sidebar, over the years, folks that find their way into large organizations as a CIO like yourself either did come up the ERP route or the
Yeah.
infrastructure route. You know what I mean? Because they span across, the whole
Yeah.
organization. So anyway, cool. That's good.
ERP has always been it's been a great journey. I think it gets you into all tenets of the organization.
It does. It does. And your centerpiece is going to be, which it usually is, finance, right? And then everything
Yep.
sort of tentacles out from there. All right. So anyway, so now
Yes.
based on where we are now, right? So Cytiva's, large global organization doing great. What's been what would you say are some of the technologies, or maybe even not some of the technologies, even some of the processes over the recent past, since you spun out, right? You spun out in 2020. I mean, certain things have really been taken off recently, if you've seen some of my podcasts, a lot of AI and such, but where would you say we are, and what do you think we got to think about here as far as technologies that are here or that are coming, right? That are going to help us as a biotech industry.
Sure. I think, I'll say there are three key trends that come to mind. Obviously AI is out there. I'll also talk on security. I think that's something that is trending, and trending in different directions, I think. And then the other one is, I think the low code application programming. I think this is an area that I think is starting to expand. So I'll talk on AI first. So obviously, artificial intelligence and machine learning are playing key roles in the life sciences industry as a whole. Drug developers grappling with escalating costs, complexities in clinical trials, navigating these challenges, it requires a focus on improving efficiencies and optimization of the development process across all the trial operations, data analysis, regulatory compliance, clinical quality and safety. I think when I think of AI advancements in the space, the integration of advanced platforms, the proliferation of intelligent automation, and I would say the advancement of digital twins enabling simulation modeling, and really the ability to access real-time data and analytics for better informed decision making. In the cybersecurity space, there's multiple tenets in here. First off, malicious actors are using AI to accelerate the spread of disinformation. We know that. That obviously can cause significant damage to an organization, to its customers, to its associates. Enterprises, obviously, we need to use the right technologies to protect ourselves against disinformation and synthetic media. Quantum computing, has the potential to break today's cryptography, depending on, where we see that particularly happen, that line happening. And then identity in and of itself, ChatGPT experienced rapid acceptance because of its seemingly human interaction. It really blurred the lines between humans and machines. And it often feels like a natural conversation, which is great. But the role of identity and authentication is going to become increasingly more and more important. I think we'll see, obviously, an increase in legal and regulatory actions around that as well. Identity protections, content moderation, and privacy, all the things that we're experiencing. Well, just the third one is low code application programming. I think of this, AKA citizen development, democratizing IT work. Functions outside of IT are becoming more and more populated with business technologists. They have programming, they have architectural skills, and with the right framework and guardrails in place, we can enable more deeper self-service capabilities. And I think that enables us to tap into capacity beyond our own IT budgets. And that to me, that's the composable business, which I firmly believe the strategy will start to move away from large, complex, monolithic systems to much more modular, flexible, self-contained application building blocks. And that actually represent those business capabilities. I think that's part of exploiting the application services and functionalities. So those are the three areas.
So a decentralized, more federated model. You think we're going to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, our ERPs that we put in, and coming from an ERP background, we really had one objective, was to really keep unstructured data out. and to be able to simplify how we get after our data. And we live in a world now of very, very unstructured data. So some of those ERP platforms they're almost like lead pipes in an old house from a plumbing standpoint. And I think that's where we start to decouple the monolith.
I haven't even thought about it from that angle. Boy, I don't even know where to go with that one. Boy, that's huge. Well, let me ask you a question then. I mean, like you said earlier, you referred to you infer, you made a living off the centralized model, and you see it going the other. It is what it is, right? How have you A, started to move there, or B, started to get your organization ready for that, or is that not something you've started to do? You just see it going there.
Yeah. Well, I think this really comes down to data. And organizations are constantly evolving, especially ours. If we have an acquisition, we have a new set of applications that we have to bring into our landscape, and we have to start to lay out a technology roadmap to where we would move those applications. But there's always, I think everybody, and I've always had a roadmap that gets us to a more simpler state, a more isolated, okay, we're going to have everything here and we're going to be able to tap in. We're going to have a data model sitting in these types of data lakes and data structures. We never get there, though, completely. We are always dealing with legacy platforms and different systems that we're integrating in various times based on risk, based on business priorities. So our ability to deliver more nimble, quick, very, very business differentiating focus application solutions, I think that's one of the things that I think AI is enabling us to go after. And that starts to democratize the data. And that the key is to get the data out of those silos in a way that we can use them for the right ways to use them and not be basically kept hostage to one set of pipes that we're operating to.
Yeah. Well, AI, I mean, right? So AI, it relies on data. It's all about the data. If you don't have data to put, you've seen some of my podcasts. You talk to some of these other, you hear some of these CIOs, and if you don't have the data, you could build the shiniest, greatest, coolest, most awesome thing. You don't got data to put through that. You're in trouble. And if you can't get it out of SAP, or you can't move it from PeopleSoft or a green screen JD Edwards or whatever it is, right? You're in trouble. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, that system still works, but you got to get that data. And all I hear about is data, 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 data. And now I'm starting to hear from the portfolio companies from private equity or private equity that they want to own the whole data chain. And they see it as, which I don't think is far off. They see it as like the petroleum of our generation. If you control the data, you're going to control the gasoline that's going through those pipes that you're talking about,
It is an absolute asset. And it's, if I think about data, I think about usability, quality, and integrity. And our job in IT, ultimately is orchestrate the delivery of data from point A to point B without compromising its integrity. We work hard to ensure that data is not created, altered, or accessed by any person or any machine that's not authorized to do so. And that's where I say these ERP systems that we spent a lot of time building to keep unstructured data out, to keep things simple. Today, data is becoming much more ubiquitous, accessible, usable in unstructured formats. It puts a lot of pressure on us ensuring the quality and integrity of the data in a new way than being able to simply rely on those big platforms. And our challenge is to keep up with that transformation of technology.
Right, and they can't handle images. They can't do any of that stuff, right? They're figuring it out. But now why? So let me ask you a question, and you may not know the answer to this. I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking. I talk to a lot of folks, and I have certain folks, and I'm talking 3, 4, $5 billion organizations where, they don't even have, any sort of chain of command as far as who's responsible for our data, right? So, you talk to the DLP folks, and you talk to the folks that are mid-level, and they're doing the security work and such, but they want to know who's up the chain, and everybody turns around. I don't know, So when they want to get something done or they need somebody's sign off, nobody's there to do it. Why hasn't that happened? What that just seems a little nutty to me.
It's a great question, Steve, and I feel that it's something that all IT professionals are. I don't think you'll find a CIO that does not have a data governance objective in their plan. And the where it gets a little bit interesting is where the ownership of that data lies, because data goes and and again, as data becomes much more, or as we become recognizing the value of the unstructured data that's sitting out there, and understanding that putting the old ways of looking at data ownership, having a data steward, data ownership, product owner around unstructured data, very, very difficult because unstructured data is very dimensional. It changes as it goes through the processes. So I think the process owner becomes a little bit more important. And this is, the growth in active metadata. It's evolving very, very rapidly. And it's used to connect a lot of different silos together. And we've got new technologies with inference engines that are getting better at discovering data sets and patterns in data across the enterprise. Unstructured data represents about 80% of the data in a typical organization like ours.
I bet it's
That's
at least
a lot of data
right?
out there. Yeah. And so, yes, we should be looking to go after that data, get good controls around who owns it, who maintains it, and then put it into a structured format in a data warehouse or the like. We shouldn't stop that, but we should also recognize that as we're doing that, we have more and more technology that's capable of looking at unstructured data and going across the two. So the combination of the two is where AI plays its role. The governance of how we use that data, how we ensure the integrity and the quality of that data, because they're two different words. In IT, we can ensure the integrity of the data that has not been accessed by somebody that shouldn't have accessed it or altered it. But we are not going to be the person that's going to be able to say, is the data right? Is it a 2 versus a 3? So ensuring that quality is where we have to build a data governance program that brings all of the business ownership to the table, and then what their responsibility is. And it's a journey.
Oh, it certainly is. It's a huge journey. I'm not sure if you saw the podcast I did with Bob McGowan at Regeneron, but I asked him, I said, Bob, what would you tell me as a young spudling kind of CIO coming into an organization that, what do you know now that you didn't know then, Bob? And he said, that's easy. Get your data ready. He's saying the same thing you're saying, he said, he didn't come out and say it, but, kind of inferred, 2015, 2016, we're good from that point forward. Anything before that, we got 30 years worth of data we got to get through. I said, really? He said, and it's a huge, huge, huge task. And then, I don't know, naively, I said, what about buying the data? He said, we still got to go through that. We can't trust that. To your point, who's been through it? We don't know what that's all about. So it's a ton.
It's AI ready data. And I think and this is the rapid changes that we're working through in our industry is what was AI ready data to 6 months or what is today was not AI ready data 6 months ago.
Right.
And that's without doing anything to the data. So that's how rapid I think the technology is getting to be able to draw inferences off of data sets. And that's where we as an IT have to stay very, very much in tune and ahead of that because we can do more with data. Every day that goes by, we can do more with unstructured data based on technology.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, one of the things that Raj Advani mentioned on our podcast was he talked about from a data perspective as a CIO, he said he'd love to hear or see. He said he feels that we could get more juice out of more of our data. And I said, what data specifically? He said EMR and EHR data. He said, I don't think as a group we're doing much with that. We could draw, to your point, more inferences out of that. There's probably things hiding in there that we just don't know. And to your point, if we are in fact, because I wasn't aware of that, right? So if we are in fact getting to the ability of every day increased ingestion of this data where we can actually utilize it, that's awesome. That's huge. That saves my daughter's graduating college, data science major. She worked for a company for several years, but she was cleaning up data using her Python and her Java. Millions and millions of people's buying patterns. She was selling it to folks that do the drop down ads on all your social media. But yeah, no, the need to do all that cleaning is, like you said, falling by the wayside, at least more and more every day, and she always says, she's like, Dad, I don't want to be a heads down programmer behind some closed door. I'm like, if you're a heads down programmer behind some closed door, you're going to be in another country. That's not here. So to your point, you're going to be interacting with the business, but you're going to know the technology. It seems like a lot of companies are getting to the point. My wife works for Bloomberg, where they're getting to the point where everybody's got to know Python, or everybody's got to know this, or everybody's got to know that, that kind of thing to be hired.
Yeah, and that's my point on citizen development. I think putting the guardrails in place to enable that is a powerful thing that we have to embrace. I also think sometimes we look for data owners, the best experts that know the data very, very well. Sometimes that can take us off track, though, because we may not know what data is important to us until we start working with it. So our ability to, again, contextualize data out of the unstructured environment, sometimes there may be data out there that we don't realize has value behind it until we start to really pull it together and start to put some models in place. So sometimes a very, very structured data governance policy around data owners can keep us from seeing the things that we may be blinded to.
And maybe that was part of what Raj's point was, is that, we're not accessing this EMR and EHR data. Maybe it had to do with, the governance around that data. I don't know. Maybe that's why we're not accessing that data. I have no idea.
Yep.
Because that's a different kind of data, and that's got a different level of whatever you want to call it, access/security around it, right?
Yeah, and not to pontificate too much on governance, but unfortunately, sometimes governance can go in places. We put controls in place, and then we forget about why we put them in place, and then we put all the governance around protecting that control, and we forget this is why we, obviously in regulatory environments with, especially with Sarbanes-Oxley, I think every CIO runs into blocks on being able to do things because we say, well, this is a Sarbanes-Oxley requirement. Well, no report is a Sarbanes-Oxley requirement. That report is a control, and sometimes we forget why we put it in place, and that's where data ownership can start to real restrictive ownership can sound good from a governance standpoint, but it can also impede the ability to move forward.
Now, you just brought up low code again, and when I hear low code, right? Because one of the things you brought up early on was security too. I see low code and security kind of that. I don't want to say working against each other, but they're definitely, you got to keep an eye on one. How do you balance that out?
Yeah, they do work. They do conflict with each other.
Conflict. There you go.
You have to have a strong governance structure in place for in general for citizen development to really work, which allows you to push some of the activities out into the other business functions. That way, you can concentrate on other areas. There's a fine line before it turns into shadow IT. Right. And when it turns into shadow IT, that's when you have the problems that obviously security, but it's cost. It's a lot of different things. It's technical debt. I think it's a matter of, setting up the right framework and guardrails, and also expectations for if you're going to be a citizen developer, or you're going to be a Python coder, even though you're sitting in a finance function. We need to, set the guardrails and understand what are your capabilities there, and how far can you go in terms of that. We're not going to just open up the shop there. But I think, it really comes down to your governance model.
And so you have to keep, I don't know, you as a group, your group, you got to at least keep one eye on that to just, yeah, okay. All right.
Oh, we keep more than one eye. You have to have dedicated
but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you got to keep an eye on that, because otherwise that could get crazy, So, all right. So, question for you. One of the things I like asking folks, tell me about. I'm going more soft now, right? About your group, right? So I'm applying for a role to work for your group. why do I want to work for you, and why do I want to work for your group? What makes you folks, guys and girls, better than some of the other big shops that I may be thinking about?
Sure. So I'll break it down to three things. First, working at Cytiva, you are at the forefront of providing solutions to transform human health. Our customers are undertaking life-saving activities ranging from fundamental biological research to developing innovative vaccines, new medicines, cell and gene therapies. But secondly, our IT organization doesn't operate like with a back office mindset. There are two narratives that my leaders know I'll have a strong reaction to. The first one is when we refer to the business as something separate from IT. We are just as much a part of the business as any other function. Don't think of our job as simply about applications, network, software development. It's about keeping Cytiva safe, compliant, competitive, so that our customers can develop therapeutics needed to transform human health. That's our job. We focus on quality, customer satisfaction, delivering those products on time. The other term that I take exception to is the term user. I really don't like that word, and my folks know when they say this was a user error, or I correct them. That was an associate error, and so the term user implies a single persona-based population. If I think about how the healthcare industry is moving to more personalized medicine, I look at the associate experience as a very persona-based approach. A finance professional, no matter how many dashboards we build for them and everything, they're going to take big chunks of data, bring it down into Excel, and they're going to chunk through and everything. So they need a machine that has the firepower to be able to process that versus a service technician who needs light, on-the-go, dependable equipment, reliable connectivity options. So I'm very, very associate focused on that. And then finally, our organization is made up of a lot of people who came from other business functions like myself. We're both an exporter and an importer of talent to all various functions in the business. If you want to be successful in Cytiva IT, you need to be able to think, speak, and act in ways that align to finance, legal, HR operations, sales. And we bring innovative tools to the table to solve those business problems in a partnership across the functions. And we're always looking for ways to improve and develop our own competencies around the business strategies.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, that's great. I have a daughter that's just graduating college, right? Getting into IT. And when she tells me I don't want to be a coder sitting behind the door, I'm like, no. The folks that are the strongest are the ones that they get the technology. You got to learn the technology. You got to learn how to do the math before you use the calculator, right? And then you got to learn the business. The folks that do the best are a 50-50 match. They don't talk technology when they're in front of the business because they don't want to hear that. You got to talk business in front of them. She goes, yeah, I want to solve business problems. So we'll see. She's actually in the process of interviewing with Viva, I think, right now. Somebody like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My daughter is also graduating college as well, and she's a cell and molecular biology major, and she's going into the pharmaceutical industry and the research and development out here in Cambridge very, very soon. She grew up under an IT dad. I was always trying to encourage her to get into programming. I said, it'll help you regardless of where you go. And she always pushed back on me. Well, she did an internship a couple of years ago at a major pharmaceutical company, and she told me that the first day she was supposed to go into the labs, they weren't able to get her in there because they hadn't gotten the training in place yet. So they gave her a Python book and they said, you should learn a little bit about Python. And now she's become a Python programmer and she uses it in her work every day. So it wasn't going to come from me, but
no. Well, if it came from you, she would have never picked it up.
No, exactly.
We don't know anything, remember?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had to beg, borrow, and steal 10th grade to get her to start that first Java class. I mean, I can't tell you what I went through. I just knew, because in 8th grade, we're sitting there watching some election, and she's looking at all this data on the screen. She keeps turning to me. She's like, Dad, with all that data, if I had the right tools, I could figure out who's going to vote for who, where, their ages, all this stuff. I go, honey, you're talking data science. She looks at me. She goes, I don't know what you just said. But anyway, I could figure this out, So that's when I knew I had to, and it was a lot, but yeah, now she does her Python and stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, my wife works at Bloomberg, and every employee that they hire knows Python, like regardless of what you're going to be doing. So
Yeah,
that's where we're going. That's what we got.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
anyway, um, well, that's cool. That's fun. Yeah, it's neat to pass it along, to the kids and see where they're going, right? So,
Oh yeah.
how about you as a leader? So you talked about your organization, how you built it out. I mean, obviously your group reflects you, right, as a leader. But if there's anything you want to add in there about how you feel you manage uniquely compared to others, that's great. But if there's nothing you want to add, that's fine too.
My team, I think, understands when, there's a couple of things that I don't negotiate on. Integrity is number one, and honesty. I expect, and I always operate, with a very, very, focus on that. And I expect it from others. It's just a given. But I also, I, I recognize the importance in, we have to be able to make mistakes in order to learn and develop and growth. I've actually been known to give objectives to some people for development needs. I want you to make a mistake this year, not an integrity mistake. I'll never have tolerance for that. And I don't have a very, very high tolerance for a second repeated mistake. But if you don't make a mistake, you're not going to learn. And so I usually try to flush that out fairly quickly and try to give an environment where we celebrate mistakes that lead to new developments and new discoveries. So if I would say, I think, making sure that I'm pretty clear on the things that I don't compromise on, and I do open up and allow for what I try to do is allow for a lot more creativity, because I think we're in an industry that has ultimately we have to transform ourselves constantly. Otherwise, we end up in the back office, and the back office really shouldn't be in a company. That's not our key. A back office should go to the technology companies. So that constant evolution, you really got to be prepared for that if you're in IT. So I'll continue to drive that curiosity and challenge.
Yeah, so the integrity thing, I mean, I pay a lot of attention to Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, right?
Yep.
I've been to the shareholder meetings, and Warren talks about that all the time. You can make mistakes. Don't cost me a shred of integrity. That's
Yep.
that's a problem. That's a huge problem for me. But other than that, if you make an honest mistake, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. What went wrong? And then to dovetail off what you said about failure, right? Failure it's part of it. And you don't learn, I always told my kids, you're not going to learn, when you're playing a sport, you're not going to learn by playing the crappy teams and beating every team 12-0 all the way through the season. You're going to learn by losing. You're going to learn by making mistakes. You're going to learn by what happens there. And, I think that athletes in today's world, they have learned that. And I think they're great folks to look at when we're hiring, because they're used away from maybe the football and basketball players, because they're always used to winning. It seems to me. But the whether it's the softball players, the baseball players, the whatever, the wrestlers, I don't know. So.
Well, I think the other thing that I would say that I am very, very focused on is that collaboration too. Going back to when thinking about that individual versus, when I see a silo forming, I will disrupt it very, very quickly. I will move people around between teams just to disrupt those silos, to bring those some level of silos and the ability to get things done. I get, but I have very, very little tolerance for silos that prevent people from really communicating and collaborating across each other.
Right. Agreed. And again, I'm going to stick with my sports analogy right there, right? The athlete learns about
Yeah.
collaboration. They learn about good teammates and good coworkers, bad bosses and bad coaches, right? That all that stuff. And they learn that quick, and they learn that early. If as a parent you don't get in the way, which I never did, I let them. We would role play. They want to talk to a teammate or a coach, but that was it. The coach from 12 years old didn't even know me, and it's I think it's good training for them. They got to do it, all that stuff. So anyway, I could talk about that all day long too. So, well, that's pretty much all I got. Is there anything else that you think we should cover before? I have one last question that I like asking my guests, but before I get to that, anything more that you want to cover before we get to the more, I guess I could call it personal fun question?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, kind of, tout a little bit about what we're doing a little bit more in Cytiva
Yeah,
in the
sure.
AI space.
I'd love that.
We've been, and we're excited about this. We've introduced, chatbots and virtual assistants now on multiple functions, and these things are starting to help us to show, to access information and speed up response times. Our software engineers, are all leveraging copilots to accelerate coding and improve software development, and that's obviously a big deal. In HR, we're exploring AI-powered service agents to provide HR anytime, anywhere type support. And in marketing, we use generative AI extensively to make content creators more efficient, respond to customer inquiries. And these are some of the initiatives we're just starting on to get in. But it's, I would say that's one thing at Cytiva. We are really starting, and I'm not just saying in IT, we are really starting to embrace and look at AI and the opportunities there. And I think our associates are getting very, very excited about it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's so much there, and if you've seen some of my podcasts, it kind of runs the range, Steve, where some folks, they're locking it down. Other folks are saying, well, if I lock it down, they're going to do this over here. Some folks are saying, let's make it wide open. Some are saying it's not my decision. Some are saying, create an HR model around your AI and your chatbots because it's got to be treated like an employee. It's got to be put through the same checks and balances, quality checks as if it were an employee. You'd fire an employee for saying some of the things some of these chatbots are saying. So, there's so much going on there. We're still in the Wild West. I think we're harnessing it a little bit, but we're definitely still in the Wild West, right?
We are, and I think we're going to continue for a while, honestly, Steve, for my same analogy on big systems. We want that one solution that solves it all. We always want that. We're not going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to be more, again, persona-based, unique, personalized in terms of, we shouldn't go overboard on that. We should keep things standard where they should be standard, where we're not going to really differentiate our competitive advantage of other businesses. We're not going to, having a unique general ledger is not going to put us ahead of our competitors. However, there are differentiators in our business that do, and we should focus on those, and we should be able to deploy solutions there without having to, to bring everybody on board for it. So I think that, I think that's going to continue, and that pace of change.
Well, thank you very much. That was great. Awesome. So one final question I ask all my guests. I'm a music guy, love music. My wife and I empty nesters now with the one graduating. And so we drive around, fly around, whatever. We go and see live shows and live bands and such. It's just one of the things we like to do. So my question to all my guests is, their favorite live, if you haven't seen anything, that's fine. But favorite live band or act that you've seen at any point in your life that you can think back on that you would say, that was the best live band I've seen, or maybe it's your favorite band and you've seen them several times and you just love seeing them, or maybe you don't have one. So I just like throwing that out there. It's a little personal fun thing, gets folks to understand a little bit about you and who you are.
So I've been to a lot of concerts of a lot of different genres. I would have to say the one that always sticks out in my mind the most. I lived in the city when I was in consulting in the 90s. It was the Tibetan Freedom Concert on Randall's Island. And I'll never forget because we had the Beastie Boys, we had Radiohead, we had U2. It was an incredible lineup. And I just managed, because he had two stages, and I just managed to time it perfectly. You didn't know which band was going to come on at which stage or anything, but I was up against the stage for U2. I was up against the stage for Beastie Boys. It was just, the best day, concert day.
We did See Here Now the year before, down in Asbury with when the Foo Fighters were there, and Greta Van Fleet and Sheryl Crow, and a whole bunch of them were there. It was good stuff. Yeah, and I was in '85. I was at Live Aid in Philadelphia.
Oh wow!
I was a junior in high school, and my parents, I don't even know if they knew I was there. I don't think they did.
Yeah, anyway. I'm a product of the '80s too, but when it comes to music, it's the '90s. I love the '90s.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. So just giving you an idea. So I told you we go and see bands. Seen Pearl Jam a bunch of times recently. I'm really upset that I never saw Nirvana.
Yeah,
there's
me
some
too.
great cover bands. great cover bands that float around doing Nirvana tunes. I saw Soundgarden once at Irving Plaza in New York City in
Okay.
2016, 15. But yeah, no, 90s are.
I was
I got a soft spot
disappointed
there.
to see CBGB's closed. I spent many times watching some bands in there. Pretty cool.
My daughter lived a half block. She was right around the corner. She was on First and Street and Second Ave.
Oh
She was a
wow!
half block from there. Yeah, that's what
Oh,
she lives in
what
the
a
city.
great place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good spot. It's a real good spot. So you spend a lot of time in the city seeing the Allman Brothers and things like that. So that was fun
Wow.
too. Anyway, well, Steve, thank you very much. That was great.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Pleasure being here.